Good evening and welcome to this ReNew webinar. My name is Isabel and I'm the Children's Development Worker for the Church of Scotland. Tonight's webinar is on the topic of recruiting people to serve and how do we enable people to work together in teams. So many of us say, oh, we've got no volunteers, there's nobody to come alongside and to help and to get involved in various areas of ministry. During lockdown, many people stopped serving. Many of our activities even had to stop. Some people have got older, some are just tired and worn out. The things we are doing may have changed and people may not feel that they have the gifts that are needed. How do we find a way forward to get people involved, to get people enthusiastic, to equip and encourage people to use their gifts in God's service? So as we start our evening, I'd like to just read a short couple of verses from Ephesians chapter 4 and then pray. So Ephesians chapter 4 from verse 11. It was he who gave some to be apostles, some to be prophets, some to be evangelists, and some pastors and teachers, to prepare God's people for works of service, so that the body of Christ may be built up until we all reach unity in the faith and in the knowledge of the Son of God and become mature, attaining to the whole measure of the fullness of Christ. Let us pray. We thank you, Lord, for all those involved in service in various ways in their congregations. We thank you for those who are involved with children and young people. We pray tonight for encouragement in equipping the saints and encouraging service in various ministries across the church. And we ask your blessing on our time together. In Jesus' name, amen. So I'd like to really welcome Ali. Ali did a great webinar for us about vision in our last series. And this evening, he's going to help us unpack and look at growing and investing in teams. Ali is a youth and children's ministry consultant, supporting leaders right across the country through mentoring and training. He's also developing Paraclesis, an association for children, youth and family ministers. And Ali is based in Lancashire. So Ali, let me hand over to you, let me spotlight you and do lead us through some thinking about this area. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Isabel. It's great to be with you. It's been raining and a bit miserable here and I've finally given in and put my fire on. I've got a wood burner, so I'm really toasty, which is great. If I nod off during my own presentation, it's just because of the heat. It's not because I'm finding myself boring. So just bear with me. It's great to be with you. I'm thrilled to be joining you for the second time. And I'm just going to launch straight in with sharing screen. And I just want to take you through a few thoughts to get us started. And then we'll do a bit of breakout groups and thinking about some things together. So to start with, just wanting to think about how we grow and invest teams, but a place to begin for me is actually a TV series called NCIS. I don't know if anybody's watched it. It's been running now for 19 seasons, and there's a character who has disappeared from the last season called Gibbs, but he has these rules. And one of his rules is this: don't waste good. Rule number 5. I recommend watching NCIS if you like crime dramas and you don't mind a little bit of American stuff, because it's that kind of thing. It's been going a long time, but in this series, his rules come up every now and then. And this one for me resonates as I think about working with teams, particularly thinking about training, recruiting and supporting people that work in teams. And I think there's a challenge for us sometimes in ministry. I don't know if you found this, particularly as Isabel's been talking about the last couple of years and the challenges post-pandemic, particularly, where we find ourselves running around doing so much for ourselves because actually it's easier. Maybe when we've been on Zoom and we've done some work over Zoom, we haven't needed as much team, so it's been us. And then it's hard sometimes to get out of a mindset where we're doing it all and we're making it all happen. But maybe we've been dashing around just trying to do stuff. And the thing is, when we come back and we start to do things and we actually need other people, are they just cannon fodder that we throw into a room to enable us to do the ministry? Or are they valuable members of our team? So when we're thinking about ratios, whether it's children's work, youth work, other activities that need people to be part of it, are we thinking about what they can bring and what they can do? Or are we just thinking, well, I just need the numbers. I need people in the room so I can just do my stuff. And I think it's hard to get out of that mindset when we've perhaps done so much ourselves via Zoom or in other ways, just try to keep the show on the road when things have been difficult the last couple of years. But I want to start with that thought, don't waste good. And is there good around us that we've not even noticed or spotted within our churches, within our organisations, where we could be encouraging people to join in and to come back if they've taken a break and taken a breather? So here's a couple of I's to get us started. I'm going to go through three things just to get us thinking about what we're currently doing and how we're working with those that we already have. And we're going to get onto in a little bit looking at recruiting and how we get other people to join in. But to start with, just how do you invest in the team that you have? How do you spend time encouraging, building them up, paying attention to who they are? I think sometimes the challenge is just because we need people to do stuff, we can be focused on the activity that needs to be supported rather than the people that are doing it alongside us. And for me, a team's going to grow and thrive together if we're investing in relationships for the sake of those relationships, not just what we hope to get out of the people that are serving. But it's looking at kind of in the round, how do we get on with one another? I like it when I like the people I'm working with. Does that make sense? We're not just doing it because it's a job or we're doing it because it's an area of ministry to get involved in. We actually like hanging out together. Whether we're doing children's ministry or youth ministry, we might look to spend time with those people. But that only comes if we're investing in those relationships, building trust, getting to know one another, and doing that for the sake of it. So not necessarily having an agenda every time we get together, but literally just meeting up with team for food, taking people for a coffee, just doing those things that are about investing in others and supporting and encouraging who they are. The next I is invite. Do we invite people to use their gifts? They might be on the team, but have we ever done with our team a kind of gifts analysis? What are the different qualities, gifts, ministries that people bring to the team that they've come and served on? We might be doing children's work and youth work, but we've got somebody who's a fantastic pianist or guitarist or can sing incredibly well. Are we using those gifts within the ministry? Do they want to bring those and serve the children and young people with that musical talent? Do we know what they can do? Maybe we've got some incredible artists that are part of our children's and youth work. Maybe we've got people that on the side have got an Etsy channel where they flog things that they've made, and they could be doing some great stuff in craft for us, but we just don't know. Do we invite them to bring and use their gifts and help us to create something quite dynamic as we work together? When was the last time you invited people to bring what they can do and share it in the ministry that you're serving in together? And the third one, I think, can be a challenge for us, but do we involve people in our plans and dreams? If you think about your vision for the children's ministry or youth ministry or leadership of the church, do you involve other people in that process? Or do you present it almost as if, here's one I made earlier? And involvement actually means potentially other people shape what the vision looks like. I was once part of a national team doing children's ministry. I won't say where it was or who I was working with, but the guy that was running it got us all to come together for what we were going to do for the theme for that current year. We were doing a big camp with lots of kids being part of it. And we all got quite excited. We broke into groups and started chatting about different themes, different ideas from the Bible, different motifs we could hang off the back of it, what staging would look like, all those kind of things. We had great, exciting conversations. Then we fed back And then the guy who was leading it said, that all sounds fantastic. Here's what we're going to do. And he had a plan just completely there. And it didn't matter what we just discussed. It all went out the window. I was like, what was the point of that? We've just sat there. I thought you were involving us, but you've already decided what we're going to do. So if you're going to involve team, really take on board what they bring and what they share. Otherwise, you disempower rather than empower people. And they feel their voice is heard as a kind of tokenistic thing. Yes, I really want to involve in what we're doing. And then you launch off in a completely separate direction anyway, and you've not paid any attention to what might have been fabulous input, but you already had your plan. It's as if you would I've just got to tick the box of saying I'm helping people to join in, but I don't really mean it. So those three things, I think, are where I want to start. So whether you've got a team that you feel is thriving or not thriving, whether you're struggling to recruit or not, just starting there, thinking, how are you investing in others? How are you inviting people to bring their gifts and their talents? And are you involving them as you plan and prepare and dream dreams about the future direction of things? And just diving into Ephesians 4, which Isabel read for us already, but I had it on my slides, which she didn't know about. But just repeating what was said earlier, I'll leave it there for you to read, because you can read that for yourselves. But just getting that sense of what is it we're for when we think about teams and working together? And is our focus in coming together with those different gifts, those different things that people bring, is it about building up others? Is it about that unity in the faith? Is it about together working towards that place of attaining to the whole measure of the fullness of Christ? And there's something in the mix about the Holy Spirit's work in bringing us together. When I think about the church, I can't think of any other group of people that in any normal circumstances may not choose to hang out together. But there we all are, being the church. And that's a unity only the Holy Spirit can bring about, because we're one in Christ together. And I think that's quite exciting for us as we think about, well, not just my ministry, but actually we're serving alongside others in the ministry of Christ as part of his body together. And it's to bring people to that measure of the fullness of Christ, which you and I can't do on our own. We need one another to be this full dynamic body. Be no good if we were all a foot or all a hand or all a left nostril. We need to embrace all the difference that there is within the body of Christ, celebrate it, and find ways for all of us to join in. And that includes, I think, in most of the teams that we're leading. There isn't just one way to do children's ministry or youth ministry. There's lots of different gifts that people can bring. And one of the most exciting things I've seen, actually, is teams in messy church, because people join in and bring who they are and find through getting involved that actually almost anything that they bring has something useful as part of it. And when I've done research and I've gone out and talked to churches, I'm often struck by the whole diversity of ages involved in different activities. But I went and visited one messy church, and I was chatting to a lady who was in her early 90s. And I said, "Oh, what do you do?" And she said, "I sit here and I chat to the children as they have their refreshments while they're making their craft." And I said, "And do you enjoy that?" And she said, "I love it." Basically, she said to me, up until I was in my mid-80s, I was just waiting to die. I thought I'd done everything. There was nothing left for me to do in the church. She prayed. She was a prayer warrior, but she just thought she was done with doing things. And she used that phrase. She said, "I'm just waiting to die." And then Messy Church started. And I feel so alive. It's given me purpose and meaning and a reason to get up and come to church and be involved. That is so exciting when people catch the vision for something, see the difference just being there, being present and alongside children and having a conversation with them as part of the team. And that doesn't need to be a big ask for people. And for her, Messy Church happened once a month. She could manage that. And it was her highlight. and she loved it. And it renewed her faith, renewed her sense of purpose and value. And I'm part of the church and doing something useful. And so I guess never underestimate what is going on for people when they join in with ministry, when they join in and serve alongside you. That's just one example. But I think when we have team, if we invest in them, we begin to hear those kind of stories and we realize just how much it means for people to be involved. That's exciting for me. That makes me almost excited about the team as I am about what we're doing together in terms of serving children and young people, in my case. I want to mention just, I guess, thinking about diversity within the team. I just want to mention a couple of things, and then we're going to have a breather. We're not going to have a breather, actually. I'm fibbing. We're going to go into groups, and then you're going to chat about some of the stuff we've looked at so far. But I wrote an article a while ago about 5 different types of volunteer. And I wonder if any of these resonate with you. Either you think, well, that's me, or you can think of somebody you've worked with where that is who they are. So the first one is the person I would call the natural. I've used a golfer as the picture because when I was about 14, I had a natural golf swing. So when I was playing golf, I could hit the ball. I dreamt I was at St Andrews, to be honest, every time I was playing golf, the home of golf. And I was just thinking, right, okay, I can hit it 150 yards every time, straight down the fairway, not into the rough, every time at the age of 14. And then somebody tried to teach me how to play. Oh, no, you see, when you're holding the club, you need to do it like this. And when you're addressing the ball, you need to do it like this. And when you swing, you need to do it like this. My game fell apart. And to be honest, I haven't played as well since nearly 40 years ago. I haven't played as well since I was 14 because I just can't, I can't get it back. And there's something about, those that we know who are just natural. They're good at what they do. So, for example, I had an 18-year-old who worked with me on a children's club, and we had about 50, 60 children coming on a Tuesday evening. And normally, until this 18-year-old started joining in with the team, when I said, right, we're going to break into groups, I had a crowd of about half the kids come and gather around me because they wanted to be in my group. And I'll be honest, I loved that. And the other team leaders just had fewer kids coming to them. And I thought, well, bless them. They're not the youth minister. I am. That's why everybody's come to me. Anyway, this 18-year-old started. And within 2 weeks, I had like 3 children coming to my group because they were all going across to her group. And, you've got a choice there as a leader. If you're being upstaged by somebody on your team, sack them. I don't mean that. I'm joking. She was so good that I was just thrilled after I got over my disappointment that everybody was going across to her group. But she was a natural. She didn't even know what she was doing, but she just had a natural way of building rapport with the children, creating a fun space for them to be in their small group time, that they just gravitated to her. And if I'd asked her afterwards, right, can you write that down? Can you explain what it is that you were doing? She wouldn't have been able to do it. So that's the first one. I think we've got people that we might work with. You might be one of them where you're just natural. You can just do it. And maybe people have even said to you, you're so natural with the children. You're just so at ease. And you can't put your finger on what you do. You couldn't necessarily tell anybody else what it is. Or maybe you think, I have to really work at it, but I have people on my team who are natural. They can just do it. So that's the first one, the natural. The next one is the trainer. I've used a trainer just because I'm trying to be ever so slightly funny. But the trainer is somebody who just, as soon as you have an opportunity to kind of do a little bit of input, they've got loads of ideas about what you could do in terms of what training is needed, what input's needed. They've always got ideas around how things could be improved or developed. And sometimes that can be a little bit irritating, if I'm honest, but other times it's brilliant. It's just what's needed just to sharpen practice and help things move along. And the trainer's great to kind of get involved in the kind of stuff that needs to happen that's part of growing and building the team. The next one is the manager. There are some people that are far better at, I guess, managing the tasks that need to happen. And that's their sweet spot. They love organizing things and making sure everything is done. They're less comfortable perhaps with the kids or even with other team, but they love sorting things out to make sure it's happening. And if you need something organizing, they will do it and they'll finish the job. I don't know if you're like this, but if you lead ministry stuff, maybe you love doing what you do, but there are aspects of the work that you don't enjoy. So admin or rotas or whatever it might be. There are people that love that stuff. No, seriously, there are. So you want somebody who will manage the detail, manage the tasks, and maybe you focus on leading the people and developing the team. But you can bring other people in with those kind of gifts, the manager. And then there's somebody who I would call the resourcer. They always know where to get an idea. They always know as you're coming up to Easter or Christmas, they've got 17 different ideas for what you could do this Easter. And they're all different from what you did last Easter. And you know how they do it, but they just have this knack of coming up with great resources or tools. They might be things they've found. They might be resources they've bought and used before, but they always have something that they can bring when you're thinking about, oh, what should we do in our program? What should we do with our theme? They've always got an idea. And then you've got who I would call actually the most annoying people of all to have on a team, but they're very, very valuable. And that is the visionary. They're less excited about what's happening now than they are about where things could be. So they see the potential, they see what could be that isn't yet. And they get very excited about planning things that have yet to happen. But they can go off on one and get really into what doesn't yet exist. And sometimes it's hard to keep a visionary rooted in reality because we're not there yet. So that's a great idea. We'll park that and we'll maybe look at that next term. But they can't help it. They're just thinking about what's next. And they can see it in their mind's eye. They have an idea of what it could look like. And they're there already. And they're just waiting for everybody else to catch up. So I just want to run back through these and ask some questions, and then we're going to break into some groups. So here you are. Are you a natural? Do you need to think about your interaction with young people or children, or do you just strike up conversations naturally? Do you find other people asking things like, how did you calm him down? Or, I couldn't do what you do, and find yourself baffled? Did you need to be asked to join in with the youth work? Or was it just an obvious path for you? You couldn't help it. You just do it. The trainer. Are you a trainer? Do you find it easy to explain what youth work is to people who ask you? Do you find yourself sharing hints and tips with new volunteers? Can you spot areas of training or support that others on the team might need? Do you find yourself watching the way the team is working together on a youth club night as much as how the young people are doing? And then making recommendations about how things could be improved. And then the manager. Are you a manager? Do you love being given a project or event to plan and organise? Do you think about projects or events you could be organising if anyone thought to ask you or suggest it? Do you see things through from start to finish? And does it frustrate you when others don't? And then the resourcer. Are you a resourcer? Do you read youth work resource books for fun? Do you find yourself saying in the middle of a film, that clip would make a great illustration for Steve's talks on Habakkuk next week? Do you always have about 3 games up your sleeve just in case there's a lull during Friday night youth club? Do you love Easter because, yes, you know it comes around every year, but you always have a new idea for sharing the Easter story? And then the visionary. Do you get bored if you haven't started a new project in the last 5 minutes? Do you have half a dozen books on the go at once? Do you get excited at the thought of creating something out of nothing? Can you see opportunities and possibilities when nobody else can? Let's be honest, you don't always pay attention to what's going on because you might have thought about something and, doing something in a different way, and that's just too exciting to ignore. Those are my 5. I think there are other kind of types of volunteer. And by sharing them, I'm not suggesting we put people in a box and say, this is who you've got to be. but they're really just examples of how a team can be really diverse if we only press into what some of the different roles could be and how we can make the most of who we've got that's joined in. And it's not to label people, it's more just to think, wow, do we have these things represented by those who are on our team? And if not, they're the kind of people that we want to hunt for. Because for me, those 5 things make a really great rounded team. It might, it's no good if you've got 7 visionaries working together, because you'll have lots of fantastic ideas, but stuff will never start. And if you've got a load of managers, I mean, do you see where I'm going with it? It's the challenge is to find a diverse team, encourage people to join in and recognize we need the kind of the body of Christ working together, the Ephesians 4 effect for us in terms of what ministry looks like with children and young people. So I want us to jump into breakout groups. I feel like I've thrown a lot at you in a short space of time, but I just want you to think about those 5 different areas. Maybe think about which one resonated most with you, and do you see that or some of those reflected in the teams that you have? Thinking about the first 3 things I mentioned, investing, inviting and involving. How well do you do that? Have you done that since the pandemic, managed to catch up with people or, gone and visited those who were joining in with ministry activity that you're leading but now aren't? Just have a conversation with one another about whatever has struck you so far. If those things don't tick the boat for you, what things are kind of resonating with you from what we've shared so far? I'll stop sharing screen. There we go.
Okay, you've got 10 minutes in your groups then. Right, welcome back everybody. I hope you've had some good discussion there. We certainly did in my group. So, Ali, let me invite you to take us on and a bit deeper on into this.
It'd be great to have a little bit of feedback from the groups, what resonated, what people shared with one another. So if there's 1 or 2 from each group that just want to say something, that would be awesome. If you can sum what you chatted about. Anyone can kick off.
I'll start for our group. So we were talking about the 5 different roles, Ali, and I said myself, I'm a bit of a resourcer, trainer, manager, and then our general discussion was that a lot of us feel that we're fulfilling multiple roles, whether that be because we don't have enough volunteers or just because we don't have the type. Because one of the things I said about myself is I said many moons ago I would have classed myself as a visionary, but I don't have the time now, I think. And one of the other things, so in our group we had two ladies that are employed as youth workers. And one thing we thought as well is there's kind of a prevalent attitude amongst the church when they employ somebody is, well, that's your job and we don't need to do anything anymore. So it's kind of like, how do you counterbalance that and make sure that people who are in employment aren't being burnt out?
Yeah, that's really good. We'll pick up on some of that as we keep going. Any other thoughts, comments from another group?
Darren, would you share what you shared just at the end of our discussion about the asset-based and maybe flipping how we do things?
It seems quite often that what we do is we design a group or a project or a piece of work, and then we say, what do we need to make that happen? And we need someone to do X, Y, and Z. But as you were talking about the inviting and the involving, it sounded much more the other way around, that it was an asset-based approach. What are the gifts we've got? What are people able to contribute? And let's involve everyone in designing what we do from what people can offer.
Yeah, I think that makes such a difference. I'll chat a bit more about that as we keep going. But that idea of starting with the gifts and talents rather than, assuming that it needs to look a certain way, therefore we need these things. Yeah, great. Thank you.
And we also talked about that, when you look at what capacity you've got and what gifts and skills you've got, you might then think about doing something very different from what you've previously done, or you might do it monthly so that you're not overwhelming people if you have got less fewer volunteers and less capacity and stuff. So it might change what you do around the gifting and the people that you can get involved. Anybody else like to share back from your discussions?
We were just, saying we could relate to the different types of volunteer and chatting about where we saw ourselves and things. And but we were recognizing that sometimes if you're working with different teams, that one might feel completely different to another one. And why is that? And it's maybe because of some of this. But also chatting about the importance of investing in team and recognizing that does take time, especially since, a lot of new volunteers or maybe people have changed roles, getting involved in different ministries since coming back from lockdowns and so on. So, but it's the importance of that investing to get to know people, to really know where they fit and what they could offer.
Thank you, Helen. Thank you. Great. Well, I think that's been some really useful thoughts coming through there. And those kind of key principles that you shared, Ali, I think are something that we can go away and kind of reflect on a bit further. Thank you for that.
Just picking up a few of those things before I dive back into a few slides. But I think an idea that I think is there for us, and you mentioned already, it's your job, particularly if you're employed to do it, is that sense of, but actually you have to be a jack of all trades. Your kind of primary calling can get lost in the midst of just trying to make everything work. And in the midst of that, I think recognizing that investing in people is part of your job. It's not an extra thing to do to make activities happen and the activities are core. Actually, investing in people has to be core alongside the activity. So my example would be, if you are too busy to invest in people, you're doing too much. Because to grow a really healthy team takes time. It takes that investment. It takes building relationships. It takes, developing trust. It takes all of those things, and there's no shortcuts to that. The reason some teams I've been asked to help are breaking down with things like communication, and there's factions, or there's a little clique over here that chat about the youth worker behind that, or whatever it is. Those things happen often because just people don't have meaningful relationships with other people outside of doing the task. But actually, if you don't have time to organise an additional meeting or go for coffee with people, it's a hard thing to ask ourselves, but am I doing too many things? And linked with that is the church expecting too much from what we're doing? We have to rethink what we're prioritising. And I would say, certainly coming out of COVID in terms of people's time, and we've already had people saying about, in our group, people talking about people more flexible, people kind of less committed. They want to do stuff, but not as often. And just some of those dynamics that are happening is, do we need to be more flexible with our activities and what we're doing? Do we need to shift from, well, we were running this weekly and we need to get back to weekly? Or do we need to think differently about what we're doing and why we're doing it? Does everything need to be weekly? Could it be fortnightly or monthly? And some of that is a bit challenging if the church has just got used to certain things happening. But then picking up on that asset-based idea is if people are passionate about something and it's linked with their gifting and their drive and their enthusiasm, their natural enthusiasm for it, they're much more likely to make something like that happen and be excited about it than if they just feel like they're a square peg in a round hole because this task needs to be done. So it's been creative and thinking differently perhaps about what we're doing and whether we need to do it in the same way we've been doing it. An example is there was a church I was working with where they had a youth club, but people weren't really coming to it. But it was one of those things that was in the diary, you did it, so team turned up, people flogging themselves really for not much return in terms of not many young people coming. It was a lot of effort. So, we had to think, well, what goes on in the village, and it was a village, that means that there's points of contact or there's opportunity that are being missed. So we just did a little needs assessment in the village, and they just paid attention to stuff going on. So an example of what was suddenly noticed was that, young people piling off the bus, coming home from secondary school. So because it was a village, they were heading off to all sorts of different schools. Secondary school, kind of the catchment was massive for the area. Different schools, they all came back to the village because it's where they lived. So they're all piling off the buses at about the same time, regardless of which secondary school they've been to. And the bus was right outside one of the church halls. So they just started a new thing called Off the Bus. So as the kids piled off the bus, they just did pizza, which sounds weird at 4:00, but young people are starving when they get home. Certainly my own daughters raid the fridge as soon as they come in from school. We've got stuff, we've planned meals, doesn't make any difference. We can't find half the stuff once they've been in the fridge. So then we have to have beans on toast or something. But, it's that kind of, so they had pizza, they had a kind of games machine they had about 30 young people starting to come to this Off the Bus, just because they thought slightly differently about what they'd been doing. And it took less effort to get that going than it did to run what they'd been running that nobody was coming to. And I guess are there some sacred cows that we've got that are a throwback to what we were doing before that we need to think, actually, that needs to be put to death? We've got other stuff we could be doing, but that is killing us. It's killing teams. So those who've stayed are less enthused than they were before. And we need to revisit our activity based on, what's the stuff we're excited about? Where's the need, or what are the things that young people are pressing into that we need to think about as the church that could be a place to start as well? So it's not just thinking about the gifting or the interests of the adults. It's thinking what the gifting or the interests of young people. And certainly in terms of one of the things that's, I think, has been challenging the Church of England, I don't know whether it's the same for the Church of Scotland, is thinking about the environment and thinking about whether we're eco-friendly or not. Now, lots of our young people are hugely passionate about that, and the church is slowly catching up. Justice is another one where young people are passionate about it. Equality is another one. And so actually, if we create some spaces where those things are explored, I'm not saying team builds itself, but I think if we have something that is around an interest or something that people are excited about, it does generate more interest and enthusiasm around a shared cause or a shared purpose than just running a thing for the sake of running it, because we've always had one, whether it's youth club or kids club or whatever. The other thing is just recognizing that it doesn't need to look as it's looked before, because the focus is the relationships that we're building with people, which includes team and young people, not necessarily the stuff we're doing. And I think that's really key. So I would say we need to hold our activities lightly post-COVID, but hold our relationships tightly. And how do we do that? That comes back to that investment in people and journeying together towards something that maybe there's a bit more of a shared vision. We might impart some stuff and say, this is what I think we could be doing. But do we draw people along with us and start that conversation early? Or if we, like I was sharing that story of us being involved in planning something that didn't make any difference what we said because the plan had already been finalized. At what point do we draw people into the stuff that we're doing? Is everything we're doing set in stone? So anybody that joins, well, you might have a view, but it doesn't make any difference because this is what we're doing. So those are just some of the thoughts off the back of the conversations and what we'd shared earlier. I'm just going to do a bit more screen sharing just to bring a few other thoughts in. So I just want to think about how we recruit team just for a minute or two. How do we invite other people to join in with what we're doing? This is supposed to be like puppy dog eyes that you can't resist. It's kind of like a bit of a pleading thing. And I think this is the worst way to recruit, is to plead with people at the front of church. You can do your big eyes, you can put your hands together and ring them, but it's the worst way, I think, to recruit people. And linked with it often is the emotional blackmail, or just blackmail, right, straight out blackmail that comes with it. So the emotional blackmail might be, if you don't join in, we'll have to close, and all the children won't have anywhere to go, and it'll be your fault because you haven't joined in. I mean, that doesn't entice people to get involved. It really doesn't. It freaks people out. And then linked with there's other ways of blackmailing. If you join in, we'll give you donuts every week that you come, or whatever it is. But there's other things that we can do that kind of thing. We're so desperate, we will just do it. We'll throw everything we can at you to get you to come along. The other thing I don't think works very well is cold calling. So literally getting out the church directory, and going through everybody and thinking, right, I will just make some calls and see who can join in. Or buttonholing somebody at the end of the service. And I remember starting at a church, and because I was under the age of 50 at the time, people made a beeline for me, and I'd only been there like 1 week, thinking he'll join in, he'll do stuff, he's breathing, he'll be all right for something. And you're just like, hang on a minute, let me get my feet under the table at least, or, sit down before we start thinking what ministry I'm going to get involved in. So I think there are wrong ways of trying to recruit people that don't work. A kind of ultimatum in the newsletter doesn't generally do it either, because what you end up with is people that think, well, I don't want this to die. I don't want to do it, but if I don't, it won't work. And they're not people passionate about it. They're people that will just try and maintain it. And actually that will kill them ultimately, and the thing will die anyway. It just prolongs it. So for me, these are the best ways of doing it. So I'll just run through them. Tell the story. What is happening? That means what is going on is exciting and something that you might want to be involved in. So rather than say, you can be clinical about it. We've got this activity. It happens for children. It happens at 6 till 7:30. Are you available at that time? Can you come and help us? Which tells you nothing about what takes place. So tell the story. What happens? Have some team tell the story about why they're involved. Have some kids say what they enjoy about the club. Now, you could argue if you throw kids into the mix, that's also emotional blackmail, because look at the precious children talking about their club. I'd better go along and help. But actually, it's communicating something about, look, there's life here. There's stuff going on that we need to invest in. Listen to these kids as they share this story about what's taking place. Enthusiasm is infectious. If you're passionate about what you're doing, then that is something that I think is infectious for other people. Now, if you're so busy that you feel, actually, I have to put on passion when I'm doing my job, and then it just collapses off me when I get home, I would argue you're doing too much. You're too busy trying to make everything work. And it's not your passion has disappeared altogether. It's just, you just need to keep things happening. So you've forgotten that, maybe you've forgotten why you're doing what you're doing. You need a retreat, but you've not had a chance to have one for about 4 years because you've just tried to keep everything happening. And actually a retreat or some space away would help reinvigorate your own spirit as you're thinking about the work that you're doing and why you're doing it. The share and tell is a bit like the tell the story thing, but it's get everybody to do it, whatever age. So sharing and telling is about thinking, is there a space within a service or a time when the church gathers when we can do intergenerational storytelling, where adults share about what they're doing, children share about what they're doing. And that intergenerational space is a place that is embraced, where everybody has something to bring and share. And then I would say a prayerfully specific ask. And this is about praying about it, discerning, as you think about potential people, who does God put on your heart or in your mind? Praying for a God opportunity with somebody in the street from church, whatever it might be, but prayerfully, and then, make a specific ask. Don't just say, will you join our team? But think, what would they bring? What do you already know about them that they could add? I noticed you love creating things, and you've made stuff for the holiday club. You've done massive scenery for us at the holiday club. We're looking at doing some regular things around the story of the three trees. If you've not heard that, it's a fantastic fable, brilliant for doing a holiday club or children's club or whatever. But we'd like could you make us a little boat and a tree and a crib so we can tell that story as part of our build up to Christmas or Easter? They don't have to rock up to everything that you're doing with children and young people, but they can be part of what's going on by just creating something that can bless the team and enable something to happen. Those people are as valuable in the team as anybody else. And that for me is about a prayerfully specific ask. What do we need? Who's got the gifts or skills, going back to what we were saying about that asset-based stuff? And how can we invite them to join in? When I was doing this kids club, apart from me, everyone else was between the age of 18 and 24. And again, it was because of this 18-year-old. She basically roped in all her peers to come and join in because she had an infectious personality. She drew other people to the kids club, and she got her friends from her house group to join in. So the house group became a kids club team meeting. Because as well as doing Bible stuff and praying together as kind of a regular house group, they also spent time praying for the kids in the kids' work and investing in kind of relationship with each other as part of building the team. I mean, for a couple of years, I didn't have to worry about team with that kids club because of this one young lady. It was amazing. And it's just thinking, what are the other spaces where we hang out? We do life together, not just ministry. And when we create that kind of atmosphere and environment, it's not like we don't ever have to recruit and it all does itself, but it makes it easier, I would argue. And then I just want to, in terms of my input, before we just have some open discussion and do some Q&A perhaps together, I just want to finish with this idea of a path. So passion, attitude, teamwork, and honour. So passion, for passion at the top left, you should be able to see a tea bag in a mug. Now, when I was younger, I used to try and make my mum a cup of tea. And the first time I tried to do it, I forgot to boil the kettle. I was 5 or 6, I think. And anyway, I made her a cup of tea. And I was like, I don't understand. I was throwing the tea bag around in the mug for ages with the water, and nothing was happening. The tea bag was not infusing the water with tea. It gradually looked grey once I'd added the milk. Just a grey mug of nothingness. She drank some of it. Oh, thank you. This is delicious. And then afterwards, I was like, it wasn't delicious, but I didn't know what I was doing. And for me, this is a picture for us about passion. If we're passionate about something, everybody can see it. It just comes out. Now, I was trying to find a verse that linked with that. The closest I've got is I'm just using the word enthusiastic, and the root for that is entheos, which literally means in God. And it's also the same root for infused, like when you infuse a cup of tea. But when we're infused with something, when, God is so in us that it just escapes, people can see our love for him, our desire to serve him. That is infectious. People see it. So I guess a question for us as we're thinking about leading team is, do people see the passion that we have for children, young people, the work that we're leading? Are we in theos? Is it that kind of in God kind of passion? This is where he's put me. I'm in my sweet spot in ministry. I'd love you to join in with me if that's your heart as well. And we grow a team of people who are passionate about what they're doing together. That's the first one, passion. The second one is attitude, which is that little smiley face. I don't know if you know this about an aeroplane, but an aeroplane has an attitude meter as well as an altitude meter. The attitude meter just tells the pilot if the nose of the plane is pointing up or down. So as you think about your ministry, what's your attitude? And I think there are things that can impact our attitude that make us less able to lead well and less able to recruit people to join in with what we're doing. And there's a load of C's that I like to link with attitude. So the first one is comparison. Are we comparing what we're trying to do with what another church is doing? Is one of the reasons it's not working because that's not what God's got for us. They're doing this up the road. We should do it. And we compare ourselves and we find ourselves in competition with others. Now, if those things don't work well for us and we don't come out on top, what tends to happen is we get into criticism and complaining and cynicism, some more C's. And those things will infect our spirit and impact our attitude. And so I guess if we're going to grow team and we're going to look after team well, we need to recognize that. I once worked with somebody because the church asked me to come and help them look at what was going wrong with the youth work. And this person who was leading it had people come and go, time and time again. And it was always their fault. And I just had to say to the church leadership, if this person's led this for the last 5 years and they've gone through 30 people on the team and nobody stays for longer than 2 months, the problem isn't everybody else. You don't go through 30 people with everybody leaving saying, I can't work with him if he's okay. It's just, so what's up with his attitude? What's going on that means it's so difficult to work with that person? And so we need to check our attitude. Is my attitude embracing new things, there to embrace people? Or am I a hurdle to people joining in? What do I need to address in myself that needs maybe sorting out? And the teamwork thing is about being honest with ourselves. Do we really want to work in a team? Do we value what team brings? And I think sometimes if I'm really honest, if I'm not the best in the room, what's the point of me? Going back to what we were saying earlier about, well, we've appointed you to do the youth work. Oh no, well, I can't have anybody on the team who's better at youth work than me. It's my job. But actually, if the managing, organizing, leading, we're good at doing that, but the upfront talky stuff, the relational stuff with young people, we need to build a team to enable that stuff to happen. That is okay. That's part of leading a great team, is having that diversity, that mix of gifts and skills. We don't have to be the answer in every situation, and we don't have to take on those kind of expectations from the church. Team is good. Team is the only way we're going to achieve anything, is working together. And so we need to maybe recognize in ourselves, am I vulnerable enough to allow other people to be in my team and be better than me at stuff? Even if church leadership thinks I should be better at that, who cares? I'm going to equip my team. I'm going to enable them to do stuff. And if they can preach a blinder with the kids better than I can, brilliant, because it's serving the children and young people. And it takes humility to have that kind of attitude and that approach to leadership. But also, I've just found if we're able in ministry to add value by raising other people up, that's us fulfilling Ephesians 4 together, to build others up for the works of the kingdom. What a privilege to do that in our teams as we see other people step up and do stuff in ministry. And the final thing is about honor. And there's kind of three different things where we need to recognize the need to honor. We need to honor God with what we're doing. We're not building a ministry or leading a thing that's about us. We need to honor God. We need to honor our team, not take them for granted or abuse them by throwing them into things that, just because we don't want to do it, or the hard stuff or the difficult things. And that's the only thing we use them for. We need to honor our team. We need to honor the children and young people. We need to look at how do we bring the best for them, which is about having the best team. We're passionate about that. If there's any kind of competition in the church, it should be about who's got the best team for the people they're working with. And let's be ambitious about that and go after having the best team, not in competition with each other, because we'll all have different teams for the different needs, but wanting the best for what we're bringing for the children and young people. So we honor God, we honor team, we honor the children and young people. The other thing I think we sometimes we leave out altogether is, do we honor ourselves? Do we give ourselves space to be? Do we thank God for who he's made us to be? Are we trying to be somebody that we think we're supposed to be in leadership as we lead teams, rather than the person God's made us to be? Are we honoring who he's made us to be? And that's a question I ask regularly in ministry, because I think that's an important one for us to think about. But those four things spell out path: passion, attitude, teamwork, and honor. And I think they make a difference and they help us head in a positive direction. It doesn't mean if you do these four things, you think, okay, passion, great, I've got that. Attitude, I'll work on my attitude. Teamwork, I'll value team. Honor, I'll do that. Great, everything's sorted. Recruitment's no problem. I've got team coming out my ears, it's great. It doesn't solve things, but it just gives us a way of thinking about what we're trying to do that I think gives a bit of shape for us around the stuff that matters. If we do it well, we're more likely to have team and grow team than if we're not doing those things. And if we're not pressing into our passion, or we don't check our attitude, or we're not thinking we are doing this together. It's not a one-man band where you just help me out. And that honor thing, I think, is so important. I'm going to finish there. It'd be great if we've got a bit of time to just chat, maybe together or maybe back into breakout rooms, whatever Isabel wants to do with us, and then a bit of Q&A.
We're not that big a group. How about just having a general conversation together? And if you're not already, if you put yourself into gallery view, and then you could stay unmuted if you like, and just chip in. Should we break the discussion up into the two sections? Maybe ways not to, but also the best ways to. Any thoughts and reflections, and then we'll look at the path thing, and then anything else that's come up for people. Does that sound all right? So anybody like to kind of comment on maybe let's look at the positive ways of good ways that work, or reflections on some of Ali's suggestions that can really work to recruit people in teams. Any thoughts about that, or to serve in any way?
I'll kind of hold my hands up to doing the not do stuff at times. I've done the newsletter thing. I've done the standing at the front. I've done the you'll always get a cake. And I've done everything. But
You're not the only one, Murray. Christine.
Well, I think
we've all done it. We've all done it. I'm only mentioning it because I've done them.
Yeah.
Not
And it's just so frustrating because you stand there and know it's not going to work. And you kind of think, you already know when you're standing there, that you're standing at the front of church saying, oh, if you don't join, we'll have to lose this activity and it'll be really sad. And you think, this is ridiculous. It's like, why am I having to do this? But I actually do like what you've said about telling a story and sharing and telling. And we did a little bit of that when we got some feedback. We've got a children's group on a Friday afternoon, and they've written down, we asked them to write down why they like coming, and we shared it with people. So I think for me, I'm going to adopt a lot more of that. We've got one service we have two services, but we've got one on Sunday for harvest. So I think I'm going to do a little bit of sharing what has happened in our church over the last few weeks, because last week we had 15 children. We normally have 5, and we have been praying a lot. But we do need people to come and help, obviously, if numbers grow for ratios and stuff. But I think, I'm going to thank you. I'm going to take that and use that on Sunday. My church may be in touch with you to give you a route, but hey, never mind.
One of the things that came up in one of the groups I was at, it's quite easy to get people to come and help with Messy Church because you don't have all the safeguarding PVG stuff and everything else to get signed up for somebody to come and help in a children's group to make up your ratios. So it's kind of easier to say, could you bake a cake and could you come and sit at a table and discuss with the family? Could you help prepare for the craft than to come and be one of the team for a children's group where you would have to have the safeguarding thing. So that's a bit off-putting for some people, I think. And also how often they might have to do it and what support they're going to get. All of that can be quite hard.
What we've not talked about, partly because we've in reality, we've got quite a short amount of time together. I could do a whole day on this, but what we've not talked about is having a job description for volunteers and thinking about the shape of what you do. And it doesn't need to be complicated. It can just be very simple. But I think some people really like to know what's involved. And they don't just mean the activity. They mean exactly that. How long do I have to do it for? And I always say to people, we'll review after 3 months. So if you're enjoying it, we'll have a chat after 3 months, almost like a probation. You don't say you're on probation to people that you invite to do it necessarily, but you just say, let's review after 3 months, if you're still loving it, and, we'll just keep going. But there is a time limit in terms of, at the end of a year, if you say to me, I'm done, that's fine. It's about you having the freedom to come and bring who you are, and these are our values. So again, one of the things I think is really important, if we're recruiting to a team that's going to be doing a particular thing, what are the values that underpin our work together? Having a really clear vision statement of our children's ministry, youth ministry, that you can sum up in a sentence. So that's really clear and it sits across the top of any kind of job description. And the values thing is really just so there isn't misunderstandings about how stuff needs to happen. So, for example, in a kids club, if people are new and kids are very gregarious and touchy-feely and come over to have hugs or welcome new people, or a child immediately tries to sit on a leader's lap as part of kind of listening to story time, there's just having real clarity around what we do and don't do as team. We don't instigate, physical contact with children. If a child bumps their head or comes over because they're upset about something, then, recognize that for what it is, but we don't instigate contact. And, it's just having those kind of clear things that are part of what underpins being involved in the team. And some people really need that. They just need that clarity, but that's important. And then just a little bit around, we have fun together. Being on our team is fun. It's not just about a lot of hard work. And, if the kids go away happy at the end, then we're kind of doing a little cheer but we're all exhausted and need to lie down. It's putting stuff in there that's really about, this is why we're doing it. This is why we value you being part of the team. These are our expectations if you're joining in. And there are simple things like you turn up 15 minutes before it starts, so that the person who's leading, youth worker, children's worker, isn't doing all of the setup. And then if you can, though we recognise volunteers are stretched and time is crazy, if you can stay behind for another 10, 15 minutes when we're done, we'd love you to help pack up. but make one of those kind of a little bit like a 3-line whip. You have to be there because we want to pray before we start doing stuff, as well as the setting up. And it's just having simple little kind of, this is how we work, this is what we do. And that can be really helpful for people. Otherwise, people can turn up, they're not quite sure where they're supposed to be, what they're doing, what their role is. So having a little job description that just unpacks things is helpful. I can drop some examples to Isabel of some volunteer job descriptions.
Yes, that'd be great.
I'll make a note.
I've been really moved really by the number of elders who've been coming for some of these webinars and who are actively involved in children and youth ministry. And what that says to me is that the whole church, these are our children and young people for us as the whole church. It's not us as the church and that separate group. And that we as a whole church are looking at what best we can do together for everybody in the church. And so, whether the minister, different leaders, people in the Kirk session are involved, I think makes a difference. And it's not just the same person who's doing everything and doing every ask. I don't know if that's any of your experience where you feel, you're the only one that ever brings up children and young people and you're not getting the backup and the support from the rest of the church.
Well, I was asked to take that I'm an elder that was asked to take on the role of being children's and youth lead elder. But I'm a word and worship leader at the church as well, and I'm also a musician. And I was at session, I said, well, yeah, I'll take it on, but I wear all these hats. The only way I'll take it on is if we can have other folk who'll rota the leader. It's not just going to be me doing it. And it's actually worked really well because we all bring something slightly different. We all do Sunday Club slightly differently. So the kids they're not getting bored. If one of us does something they don't particularly like, then that's fine because Anne will be along next week and they love it when Anne does, what Anne's really, really good at. So, and it also, the thing I've always found with Sunday, and you talking about sacred cows earlier on, Ali, was, it was the same people doing it every week. So it meant that, our service only happens in the morning. We didn't have an evening service. So it meant that those individuals were only getting 20 minutes of a service themselves. So they were getting absolutely no spiritual food themselves. And I said, look, I can't cope with that. If that's what you're expecting me to do, I can't cope with that. So can we get our heads together and
do it differently?
And it's working. It's not perfect, but it's working for us at the moment. And it is just a case of it's not happening to the same people all the time. Because when we've had a bit of upset in our church and some folk have left, and one of them was the lady that had been doing Sunday school for 15, 20 years, and just I think just felt so put upon by it all that she just couldn't stay. And that's really sad to have lost somebody who was such a big part of the church and had such a great role to fulfill, but was just being taken for granted, really. So.
I think in the Church of Scotland, having grown up in it and been in Sunday school in it, etc. myself, there was always a division between children and adult activities. So children weren't allowed in communion and children were taken out, and so there was like an obvious division between what children did and what adults did, and it's kind of trying to bridge that gap and introduce a kind of more intergenerational thing, because at all the different kind of webinars I've been at, I'm kind of like, I get motivated by these things, but I find it really a struggle because people still see that I can't do that, that's children's stuff, and it's kind of like, but don't you see your experience in life could help this young family, and you can connect with them. And it's kind of this frustration in me more that I've had to come to terms with, that I have to trust God that the right people will come on the teams. I have to trust him that I'll be led to the right people and not be pleading with people like, oh, please come on. And they're like, oh, I know nothing about children. And we don't do that with children. It's like, well, why not? And I've kind of, I was made an elder this year as well. And I'm the children and families worker. So I've kind of like just went full headed into it and just thought, you know what, like you just have to, like, if you're not going to listen, then huff. But I just kind of go with my ideas and I don't really care. Like, it's not that I don't care if I offend people. I think people need to hear the reality. And the reality is, like Ali was saying, we need to kind of feed into what children are doing and what children like doing. And we need to look at them as well as our team. And and you're not going to have maybe a full church of 50 Sunday school kids on a Sunday morning ever again. But if you have a messy church, it might have children. If you do this, if you do that. So it's looking at things differently. But for me, the frustration and challenge is just getting over this whole barrier of we are one church. We are not an adult congregation.
I wonder if we could have a bit of discussion about the path for the last 5 minutes, the passion, attitude, teamwork, and honour as key principles to guide and help us as we work together as teams. Any reflections on that? I was quite challenged about the attitude and all those comparison, criticism, cynicism, which I think you were kind of alluding to a little bit there, Kirstine, and how, you know, it's the attitude of the whole church, isn't it? And as well as our own attitudes and attitudes of leaders and how significant that is.
There was something that occurred to me about teamwork, Ali, and it was when you were talking about the attitude thing and about making comparisons with the church down the road. And I need to be a bit careful about talking about the church down the road because Kirstine is from the church down the road. But one of the things that we've discovered speaking to each other recently is, you know, the world is a different place. And actually, if you're looking at the church down the road and that you're seeing something that's working really well for them, well, maybe it would work really well for us, but maybe we need the church down the road to work with us and help us to get to the point where it's working well for us. So it's about that kind of wider team thing, that it isn't necessarily all from us or from our church. It may be that as neighbouring churches, we're meant to be helping each other to do things.
That's a really good reflection, Martin. And one of the things we've been looking at is new worshipping communities. And I've noticed that a lot of those new worshipping communities are things like Messy Church or things with children. And a lot of those are churches actually doing something together. It may even be with a different denomination or the church down the road. So running a joint holiday club, doing early years things together, Messy Church together. So sharing all those gifts, pooling them together is a wonderful resource. Mari, thank you so much, Martin.
No, I was going to say it's really interesting because there's a few of us in East Kilbride that have been trying to do that for a while, but what we found recently with I'm going to mention the word and everybody's probably going to make me put a pound in a box somewhere, but the Presbytery plan has come out for East Kilbride and it's controversial. There's no doubt about it. It's very controversial, and I've been talking to the youth worker of a church that I didn't expect us to be potentially going into union with, but that's what's been suggested. And we're quite enthusiastic about it, but the other church are definitely not. And we've got this sort of horrible position where we're trying to work out, do we still keep talking to each other or do we need to just, and it's a kind of horrible position to be in at the moment. And it's difficult because I think we said at our session recently, you know, we're so getting caught up at presbytery planning at the moment that we're kind of forgetting that there's kingdom work to be done just now. And we can't stand still, but that I think it's getting over people's anxieties, and maybe some of us are thinking a wee bit further down the line because this is maybe just an initial step, and we're going to have to be working as a town, as East Kilbride, which is a huge town, working more together, and pulling resources and just helping each other out. I think it's good to hear that you guys are talking, though, Kirsty and Martin.
Yeah. Oh, it's been
That's a
amazing.
really important principles, kingdom values. And I just thought, what is it that around children and youth ministry, we can be a gift to the wider church in how we work, how we want to work, how we want to bring in God's kingdom, and what can we share in these very difficult, challenging times.
No, it's been really good because Martin's in Queensferry. They have a messy church, and it's with 3 or 4 congregations, Martin, isn't it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so we decided we were going to start one, but we went to visit Martin's, and Martin kindly let us go and helped us with our planning hours, which is fantastic. And we've talked about, regardless of presbytery plan, I think a kind of joint holiday club next year and using the same resources so we can plan it together and then kind of duplicate it in the 2 places in different weeks. So I think it's just accepting that we're not a church that's just an individual yet, and we honour all the people within our and all the team people there, but we kind of put our kind of thingies out wider and just say, do you know what? Sometimes we have to accept that perhaps we have a really older congregation and it's difficult to get volunteers. Martin maybe has some younger people there that could come along, help us. We have younger people that go and help him. It's just that kind of thing where I think church as a team and a unit, and that passion and drive has to go out with the church, and we have to work together.
Just a helpful quick story. I know we're just at 9 o'clock nearly, but I say helpful. It's a challenging story perhaps, but remember David in Saul's tent about to go out and fight Goliath, and there's the armor that's placed on David, and it's just ill-fitting. It doesn't work. And David has to throw it off. I mean, first up, David's the only one who's going to go and fight Goliath. And he's given all the stuff that everybody else has been using that hasn't done anything. And this doesn't work for me. I've got to go and do what I do. And I think in terms of us encouraging young people and children, those we're working with, seeing new wineskins in the church, like you say, we've got kingdom work to be at. And I guess we just need to pray that the church structures adapt, recognize what's going on, and we have more David stuff allowed than kind of Saul armor that's placed upon us in terms of what's expected and how we're supposed to be. And that story is one I think the church, just generally, Church of England too, need to pay attention to and think, what are we putting on the next generation around the expectation of what it looks like to be part of the church? And how do we change that narrative? And I think that's really important. You guys are doing incredible work that might feel thankless at times or really hard, but it's making a difference. It is kingdom stuff, whether, the church, the wider structures, the presbytery plans, whatever they are, notice it or pay attention. So thank you for everything you're doing.
And I think it's kind of keeping focused on the main thing, which is God and growing faith and the kingdom, and not getting distracted by all the other things. And there's so many discouragements, and we can just get focused on those. So thank you so much, Ali, for really encouraging stories, some great principles and some things to continue to think about. So really appreciate all you've given us. Can I just check with you, the people gathered, if you're happy for us, as we are on the screen, to be on the recording, because I can either stop the recording before our group discussion or include it. I'd quite like to include it because I think it's quite helpful for people to hear, but I did just want to check that you're happy for that to be included. If there's anybody, on reflection, if you think, oh, you've said something that maybe you don't want to be on the recording, let me know and we can.
I'm trying to think of a sentence.
I don't think anybody said anything that we don't all identify with or feel elsewhere, but I did just want to check with that. I'm just going to pray in a minute and close, but Ali and I will be around for a little while afterwards. And if anybody would like to just stay and talk a bit more about any particular situations or anything that's come up for them. Martin, I did wonder whether you'd could stay on and just fill us in on where things are at with Queensferry, and your recruitment, if you would like, and if anybody else would like to stay on, you're more than welcome to stay. And the next ReNew webinar is with Jen Robertson, who some of you will know, looking at engaging with the Bible in intergenerational ways and how we can kind of reinvigorate how we connect and engage and use the Bible. And the story Ali's just shared about David and Goliath is a great example. We need to be drawing on those wonderful stories from the Bible to help us at this time. So let's just pause, and I'm just going to read a short prayer from the Iona community. From where we are to where you need us, Christ be beside us. From what we are to what you can make of us, Christ be before us. From the mouthing of generalities to making signs of your kingdom, Christ be beneath us. Through the streets of this world to the gates of heaven, Christ be above us. Surround us with your presence. Inspire us with your purpose. Confirm us in your love. Amen.